Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
There's a shift happening in Detroit, and most people are still sleeping on it. Welcome to Detroit Lions Lovers, where nothing about the Detroit Lions goes unnoticed. Every win, every mistake, every headline, we break it all down. And today, we need to talk about what is really happening in Detroit. Not the version the national media is giving you. Not the hot take from someone who watched 2 highlights and formed an opinion. The real version. The version that actually explains why this franchise is not just improving, it is quietly becoming something the rest of the NFL should be genuinely concerned about. The Lions are not sneaking up on anyone anymore. They have announced themselves. But even now, even after back-to-back dominant seasons and a fan base that has waited decades for this moment, there are layers to what Detroit is building that are not getting the attention they deserve. The dominance is rising. The improvement is hidden in plain sight. And today we are pulling back the curtain on all of it. Let's establish the foundation first, because context matters here. For the better part of 4 decades, being a Detroit Lions fan required a specific kind of emotional endurance. It required you to watch talent get wasted, coaching decisions get botched, front office moves get bungled, and promising windows get slammed shut before they were ever fully opened. The franchise accumulated losing seasons the way other organizations accumulate draft capital. It became almost a cultural identity. The Lions as lovable losers, the Lions as the team you invite to Thanksgiving because they will not threaten anyone. The Lions as the punchline in conversations about NFL futility. That narrative ran so deep, so long, that even when the foundation genuinely started to shift, people dismissed it. It was a mirage, they said. It would fall apart, they said. Dan Campbell was a motivational poster and nothing more, they said. And then the Lions kept winning, and kept winning. And the narrative started cracking. But here is what the national conversation is still missing. The Lions' rise is not just about wins and losses. It is about something more fundamental. It is about a complete top-to-bottom organizational transformation that touches every department, every philosophy, and every personnel decision this franchise makes. What is happening in Detroit right now is not a hot streak. It is not a favorable schedule run or a quarterback playing above his ceiling. It is a structural rebuild that has been executed with unusual precision, and the results are only beginning to compound. That compounding is what should terrify the rest of the NFC, and frankly, the entire league. Start with the identity, because everything else flows from it. Dan Campbell did not arrive in Detroit and install a system. He installed a mentality. There's a meaningful difference between the two. Systems can be scouted, countered, and neutralized. Mentalities are harder to game plan against because they live in the building long after the schematic adjustments have been made. What Campbell brought to Detroit was a belief structure. A genuine, non-performative conviction that toughness, accountability, and relentlessness were not just football buzzwords, but operational principles. The roster was going to be built around players who embodied those things. The culture was going to be built around coaches who modeled them. And critically, the front office was going to support that vision rather than undermine it. Brad Holmes deserves enormous credit for his role in all of this, and he does not receive nearly enough of it in national conversations. Holmes arrived with a specific philosophy about roster construction. Prioritize the trenches, build from the inside out, find value where other teams see risk, and do not overpay for names when you can develop talent into contributors. That philosophy has played out almost exactly as designed. The offensive line is not just good, it is the kind of unit that defines a team's ceiling, the kind that offensive coordinators around the league build their game plans around. The defensive front, while it went through a significant reshaping cycle, has been rebuilt with the same intentionality. Holmes has consistently found players in the middle rounds of drafts who overperform their draft position, and he's avoided the catastrophic overpays that cripple salary caps and strand franchises in mediocrity for years at a time. But here is where this gets interesting, and this is the part of the Lions story that the surface-level coverage consistently fails to capture. The hidden improvement happening in Detroit is not just about the players on the field. It is about the infrastructure surrounding those players. It is about the development pipeline, the coaching continuity, the way this organization now retains and promotes internal talent, rather than constantly cycling through outside hires chasing a quick fix. When Detroit extends coaches, when they promote from within, when they create an environment where staff members want to stay rather than flee for other opportunities, they are building something with shelf life. Organizations that win one Super Bowl and then spend 5 years replacing their coaching staff do not build dynasties. Organizations that maintain continuity, develop people from within, and hold onto their best minds build something that sustains. The Lions are increasingly in that second category, and the rest of the league has not fully priced that in yet. Now let's talk about the roster, because the talent evaluation story here is genuinely remarkable. when you look at it across multiple drafts. Detroit has assembled a core that is not only talented, but structurally balanced in a way that most teams spend a decade trying to achieve. You have a franchise quarterback in Jared Goff, who has evolved from a player many dismissed as a system product into one of the most efficient, decision-making oriented passers in the entire sport. The transformation has been methodical. Goff leaned into the coaching relationship, leaned into the offensive framework Ben Johnson constructed around him, and became the version of himself that the Lions needed him to be. His pocket presence, his pre-snap recognition, his willingness to take what the defense gives rather than forcing the action, all of it has matured into something genuinely elite. The people who still dismiss Goff as a game manager are working with outdated information, and the tape from the last 2 seasons makes that abundantly clear. Amon-Ra St. Brown remains one of the most underappreciated receivers in professional football, and that sentence should stop making sense eventually, but somehow keeps applying. St. Brown is not just a slot receiver who wins underneath. He is a route technician whose understanding of leverage, spacing, and defensive tendencies allows him to create separation at every level of the field. He competes like someone who has something to prove on every single snap, and that competitive disposition is contagious in a locker room. When your most skilled defensive weapon plays with that kind of chip, it sets a standard that every other offensive player has to meet. That standard has become part of Detroit's offensive identity, and it shows up every week in the way the entire unit competes. Sam Laporta arrived as a first-year tight end and immediately looked like someone who had been in the NFL for 5 seasons. His route running, his hands, his understanding of where to be and when, those are qualities you typically only find in veterans who have been refined by years of coaching and experience. The fact that Laporta came in ready is a testament to the development work Detroit's staff put in before a single regular season snap was taken. Tight ends who can both block and threaten the seam are among the most valuable chess pieces in modern football. And the Lions have won at what should be the beginning of a long and productive career. And then there is the offensive line. This is where Detroit's dominance becomes almost unfair to discuss, because the gap between what the Lions have up front and what most of the league is working with is significant enough that it fundamentally changes what this offense can do. This is not an offensive line that simply executes blocks. This is a unit that imposes its will, that controls the line of scrimmage physically in a way that changes the game before the ball is even snapped. The run game that Detroit has developed, the wide zone concepts, the power combinations, the misdirection and motion packages that keep defenses guessing, operates at the level it does because the offensive line makes it work in real time against real resistance. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are excellent backs. They are also excellent backs, playing behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and the distinction matters. This is the part fans will want to sit with. The reason this offense is so difficult to defend is not any single concept or any single player. It is the accumulated pressure of multiple threats operating simultaneously within a framework that has been refined and drilled to the point where every player knows not just his assignment, but the intent behind the assignment. That is a coaching achievement as much as a talent achievement, and it reflects the kind of cohesion that takes time to build. Detroit has put in that time. They are now reaping the returns. Defensively, the picture is more complex and more interesting because of that complexity. The Lions made significant investments on that side of the ball after recognizing that their offensive excellence was carrying more weight than a championship-caliber team could sustain long-term. You cannot score your way through every January game. Eventually, you need a defense that can close out opponents, that can create havoc in critical moments, that can make a stop when the season depends on it. Detroit identified that need, addressed it aggressively, and the results have been visible in how the team's profile has changed in high-leverage situations. This is not yet a defense that dominates conversations the way the offense does, but it is a defense that is improving in exactly the right ways, at exactly the right time. The pass rush has been a particular area of focus. Aiden Hutchinson, when healthy, is among the most disruptive edge rushers in the conference. His motor, his hand technique, his ability to win at the point of attack with multiple moves rather than relying on a single go-to rush, these are the qualities of a perennial Pro Bowl caliber player. Building a pass rush around a foundational piece like Hutchinson and then supplementing with complementary rushers who can win on the backside creates the kind of situational mismatches that quarterbacks hate facing in the fourth quarter of a tight game. Detroit has been investing in that complementary depth, and it is beginning to pay dividends. The secondary remains an area where the trajectory is more important than the current standing. The Lions have drafted and developed defensive backs with the understanding that the modern NFL requires cornerbacks and safeties who can function in multiple coverage shells without being liabilities in any of them. That kind of versatility is expensive on the open market and virtually impossible to find in a single draft. You build it over time by developing players, by creating a consistent defensive scheme that allows players to understand their responsibilities deeply rather than constantly adjusting, and by putting coaches in position to maximize what they have. Detroit is doing all of those things. The secondary is not the finished product yet, but the direction is clear. Special teams, and this is something that rarely gets the attention it deserves in broader team evaluations, have been a quiet area of strength for Detroit. Field position matters enormously in the NFL, and teams that consistently win the field position battle force opponents into more difficult situations at both ends of the field. Detroit's special teams units have contributed to the overall team profile in ways that do not always show up on a highlight reel, but absolutely show up in the final score. That is coaching. That is roster construction. That is organizational attention to the parts of the game that casual analysis overlooks. Now let's talk about what all of this means going forward, because the trajectory here is not just important, it is genuinely exciting in a way that Detroit fans have not been able to say for a very long time. The Lions are entering a window. Not a window they stumbled into, not a window that opened by accident or because a rival's situation deteriorated. A window they built deliberately over multiple years of aligned decision-making between the front office, the coaching staff, and the ownership group. Those three parties, agreeing on a vision, executing that vision without compromising it when the early results were difficult, and maintaining the discipline to let the process work, that is rarer than it sounds. Most franchises experience chronic misalignment between at least two of those three pillars. Detroit has had all three pulling in the same direction since Campbell and Holmes arrived, and the compound effect of that alignment is now visible in the product on the field every single week. The NFC is loaded. That is the honest truth. San Francisco has been a perennial contender. Philadelphia has assembled a roster with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. The Rams retain the kind of offensive infrastructure that makes them dangerous regardless of circumstances. Green Bay has developed a young quarterback who is beginning to look like a long-term problem for the rest of the conference. Competing at the highest level in the NFC is not a given for anyone. But Detroit is not competing at the highest level because they got lucky or because the schedule broke right. They're competing because the organization made the right decisions repeatedly over an extended period. And those decisions have accumulated into something formidable. Here is what separates this Lions team from the previous versions of Detroit that briefly raised hopes before fading. They are built to sustain. The salary cap management has been handled with discipline. The core is young enough that the window should remain open for multiple seasons. The developmental infrastructure means that when roster turnover inevitably happens, the organization has the internal machinery to replace contributors rather than scrambling to plug holes in free agency at inflated prices. These are the structural advantages that separate franchises that win once from franchises that win repeatedly. Detroit is constructing the latter. The coaching staff extension and retention question will be one of the most closely watched storylines in the next 12 to 18 months. Ben Johnson has been the subject of head coaching speculation for 2 consecutive offseason cycles, and eventually one of those opportunities will be the right fit. Detroit will face that challenge. How the organization handles it, whether they have a developmental pipeline within the staff to elevate from within, whether they have built enough institutional knowledge into the system that it does not collapse when a key voice departs, will say a great deal about the depth of what they have built. The best organizations survive those transitions. They have to, because the NFL never lets you keep everything. The question is whether you have built something bigger than any individual contributor. Every indication from Detroit right now suggests the answer is yes. The Lions are not just winning, they are changing. They are evolving from a franchise defined by its suffering into one defined by its standards. The culture Campbell installed is no longer a talking point. It is a lived reality, a competitive expectation that the players in that locker room hold each other to regardless of what is being said outside the building. That is the hardest thing to build in professional sports. You can buy talent, you can hire smart coaches, you can allocate draft capital strategically. But you cannot manufacture genuine buy-in. You cannot manufacture a locker room that holds itself accountable. That is organic, and it takes years of consistent leadership to cultivate. Detroit has it. Right now, today, Detroit has it. The hidden improvement story is not hidden anymore. Not if you're paying attention. The rising dominance is real, it is structural, and it is not going away. The Lions have built something that goes deeper than any one season, any one roster, any one coordinator. They have built an identity. This is not a team that is peaking. This is a team that is still ascending, and that should keep the rest of the NFC up at night. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where do you see this Lions team in 2 years? What is the ceiling? And what does Detroit still need to get over the top? Let's talk about it.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.